The industrial military complex has promoted cruel wars with the financial purposes and very clear geopolitical objectives. They have distributed the geographic hegemonic in the world without concern for refugees and all the poverty they have caused. And after World War II, they had a transatlantic institution that came up at first to control the Soviet Union, and afterwards there were more enemies on the board: China, Russia, and Middle East. What has left for Europe? Is this a truly equitable alliance, or is it about subordination to Europe, to the interests of the United States, and their need to be number one? It keeps the United States the number one power in the world, and the multilateralism takes place in the world. What is the purposes of expansion? Why are they looking at Latin America and the Caribbean? NATO, their geopolitical plans, and what is their expansion plans here in Latin America specifically? We will begin now. We will look at the news, and let's see the players that are involved with their own interests. Regarding their foundation's anniversary, they had an agenda in Washington, D.C. NATO celebrated the secretary of the institution got together with the President Donald Trump, and they, in an attempt to try to calm the tempers of the president that is unsettling all their alliances, they held a press conference, and they had a meeting between external relations ministers and a solemn ceremony in the Congress where he ratified their line against Russia. It's a threat, though right now it's assertive, and Russia was accused of not complying with the treaty, and the United States has several missiles, and they did not have to comply with the agreement and with the treaty. It's still possible that Russia will still have to fulfill their reiteration, and we ask that Russia has to comply with the treaty for European security. Why did NATO? Why wasn't NATO birthed? We want to review our map. NATO, due to its letterings, this is a political association or a military force to try to set back during the Cold War against the USSR and against all the communist governments that sprung up throughout the Cold War. Due to their structure, that is led by U.S. commanders. It began in 1948 between France, Belgium, Netherlands, Luxembourg, and United Kingdom. It is governed by the Washington Treaty of 1949. It integrates 29 member countries, United States and Canada, and the rest of the European. Norway, Latvia, Lithuania, Denmark, Luxembourg, Estonia, France, Greece, Turkey, Greece, and all the countries. All the countries in Europe, and Luxembourg that joined in 2017, and Portugal, and Turkey, and it has other collaborator members which participate in the meetings, and their own partners. For example, in Colombia, it's their seat lies in Brussels, and Jane Stolten, who is the president of the institution. Two of their principles is always been open to military interventions, Pacific conversations, unless when diplomatic ways fail, and against any attacks against any of the members is an aggression against all members. Several military operations and bombings against the institution has taken place throughout history. For example, in Yugoslavia in 1992, Kosovo in 1999, Afghanistan in 2001, Iraq in 2003, and Libya invasion 2011. We will review the numbers and with the portals and the Russian Sputnik portal. And in 2018, this article from 2018, and previous to the summit, the last summit that took place in Brussels, and where their seat, NATO seat lies. NATO is this history of an expansion in the transatlantic agreement, and their plans of expansion has 29 members. And we can see clearly in the map, in 1990, they had these members, 16, and from Belgium to Spain, UK, Denmark, Italy, Canada, and Netherlands, and Norway, Portugal, Turkey, Germany, and United States. And afterwards, in 2004, Bulgaria, Lithuania, Romania, Slovakia, Estonia. 2009, Albania and Croatia. In 2017, Montenegro is the last one. And in the map, we can see exactly all the territories they have occupied. And this is the timeline of the actions, military actions carried out, and some that we mentioned. This timeline is important. The last one, 2004, they have auxiliary missions in NATO in Iraq, where the NATO soldiers train security forces in Iraq. And we will go now, or we will go, or we'll stay in this web page. And NATO claims a spy in the Black Sea, more spy actions in Black Sea from a few hours ago, and it's saying that the representative from the U.S. informs that in the last meeting between ministers yesterday, they will have more reconnaissance flights in the area of the Black Sea to guarantee to safeguard the passage in the strait. It's important for Bulgaria and other countries that the NATO looks after their security to prevent, between quotes, the Russian intervention, and of course Russia through their spokespeople. And Dmitry Peskov answered that they defined the regime from the Bosphorus, and saying that all the countries can traverse this strait through peace and war times. But it's different for different for some countries in the Black Sea. There's a restriction regarding the boat and the stay of the ship. In the last November, 2018, Russia took over from two boats from the Ukraine that invaded close waters in Crimea, and it was considered an intervention from the Ukraine, and we asked for NATO's answer, and we still are waiting for the answer after their anniversary. We have more data from our correspondent in D.C. because he has been covering this first play, the NATO agenda in Washington D.C. and in their celebration of their 70 years. What was the first day of their celebration of the 70 years of NATO here in Washington? The secretary addressed the Congress and insisted that Russia represents a threat to that organization, and we got together with an expert from NATO, 5 times nominated for Nobel Peace Nobel, and he's saying that the only threat for Russia is NATO, and he's saying that NATO represents the three-fourths of the military budget of the planet, including the weapons, and the need to have a threat or an enemy is necessary to justify the expansion that Trump was mentioning when he got together with the NATO secretary, that they will expand $100 billion in NATO, and they will. And he also mentioned something interesting, saying that the United States, in that the Secretary General qualified as the backbone of NATO, they don't need weapons to reach their goals, and saying that one of their objectives is to combat terrorism. But Swanson said that sometimes the United States does not practice with weapons against this. And he cited and he mentioned Venezuela, and he mentioned the electrical sabotage in Venezuela, and he mentioned other terrorist actions. This is one of the last days of the celebrations, and we expect more protests and march, an important march, because there's a lot of rejection regarding this institution that is that it's linked to murders and crimes in several areas. Once they have intervened, all they leave behind is death and destruction. Thank you very much. Death and destruction, keywords, and where we want to raise our first questions. This is an institution that historically has committed crimes against humanity, but they are presented as an institution for safety and security, and for safety. But for whom? There are discrepancies. How important are they? And what we should ask ourselves, what is their agenda, their expansion plans? And is NATO the one that holds the United States and their own interests? And we will ask our guests and after the break.
From here to beyond the South, from here to the Caribbean or further north, where can I see news connecting the whole South? From Washington, from Mexico, from Caracas, from Quito, from Havana. You can always see the news from a new vision, connecting the global South, only on Telesur.
NATO, 70 years, and their geopolitical interests in their expansion plans, specifically in Latin America and Caribbean. We will go now to the portal Prensa Latina, and with our article, NATO in Trump's terrain, territory, critics and protests. And it's a correspondent for that news agency. And the article says beneath the photograph, in April 4th, all the people in the nation will remember for 1968, the murder of Martin Luther King, and she's talking about Martin Luther King, and she raises the question, this journalist, saying that this is it's a paradox, because during those days, those celebrations in Washington, the they had a 2-day meeting of the controversial institution, being accused of war crimes against humanity. And there was a meeting. There was a protest against against the White House, and saying how NATO murdered a million Iraq, and asking for NATO to leave the Middle East. A yes for peace and against NATO's presence. The anniversary was darkened by the discrepancies between their members there, because of the because of the budget and other important and critical reasons. Even though they had several compliments against the Western alliance, Donald Trump, which has called the NATO obsolete, said that, and now he's saying that with beyond the form and structure, his concern is on the budget. He's saying that the rest of the members have to contribute more because most of the weight falls on the shoulders of the United States, which was shown the summit years ago, and he's in that the possibility to raise the military budget, and saying that 62% of the budget, and say and the other country members don't contribute as much, and this is one of the controversies between the members, and it's in 2000. There are more tensions. White House claims Turkey is saying that Turkey bought missiles because this is a treaty made already, and especially when NATO cannot protect their space. And Germany also had some had complaints due to its least contribution and the possibility of a Cold War, and it's also everything has this has reached more tensions after the treaties from Reagan in 1984, and saying that NATO does not hold this treaty and does not take place in Europe, and is saying that he does not feel he has to answer. But beyond these tensions, NATO has been very effective for military domain and a war instrument, and has gone beyond their original constitutions creation. And now we will go to Paris, France, and we talk to an international analyst, and Hugo knows about when he was exiled to France and he had to leave Chile. So welcome, Hugo. And my question for you is before we go into these discrepancies within NATO, does this institution, how would you define it based on their interest historically? Good afternoon, and greetings for all Venezuelan people from France. Yes, the question that you made, the NATO's reason for being, resident debt. And at the beginning, it was thought to be obsolete after the Berlin Wall, and France proposed to have another European organization for defense, etc. But the United States made other plans, and they decided to stay in Europe, dominating. And in spite, though it had no reason of continuing their existence because of their fight against the USSR, they tried to integrate all the countries from the ex-USSR into NATO. And French intentions of having their own independence, the European independence regarding NATO, was frustrated, and Chirac had to bow down to the evidence that a European defense could not exist outside of NATO, because the other partners, the other members, did not agree. So, sometime afterwards, France went back to the military institution, and which left. So many years before, they had refused to participate in the military institution. But from that moment on, the United States decided to integrate not countries that are not Atlantic, in spite of their name, but especially because they wanted to project to an operations territory, which was afterwards the wars in Yugoslavia, Iraq, and the Middle East. Their raison d'etre was essentially an instrument for military domination in the United States worldwide, which has overstepped their action territory. And it's not an alliance itself. It's not an entity where several countries are allies, are in equality of equal conditions, but it's a military club from allied countries which are allied to the United States, and this is determined towards the benefit of this world power. That is my answer to your first question. So now, is the United States the one that still holds the agenda? It's an instrument for world domination, for serving the United States. So what is the interest for Europe? What is the benefit for Europe? That is a very good question, because regarding their European interests, we cannot understand this unless we analyze the basis of an acceptance of the U.S. leadership that has to do with the integration and of the neoliberal agenda worldwide. This is to say, the European countries are following the United States in their military adventures, so they won't be left behind an alliance that in the economical territory and in the diplomatic territory, it's very convenient to be with the United States. There are no real interests. These are more ideological and economical interests. But regarding defense of Europe, accepting defense against terrorism, they do not have. It's not very logical. But what we see is a subordination within the framework of an hegemony, one-sided hegemony, because that United States wants to hold on to. Now, regarding the discrepancies, the internal discrepancies, and we understand that there's the budget, that Trump is asking that the rest, or demanding the rest of the members put the same amount of money, and also the complaint of Russia that Turkey bought weapons from Russia. Is the deal done? And they said the deal is done. They're not going back. So also their demands against Germany to cut back all the plans of the gasoduct, Nord Stream gasoduct, which is an alliance with Russia. But so, what about these discrepancies, this difference? Will they affect the alliance? Those are demands that must be understood within a logic of the reorientation that the United States is giving their position in the world. They want to keep these European countries tied to them, and through a threat and a warning against Russia in Europe's case, but they are reorientating. Their vision is moving towards world hegemony and towards Latin America. So they want to wash their hands from the commitments they have made, their funding commitments they have made of this military apparatus in Europe, and they want to push the European countries to contribute financially to protecting that effort. But it's it's a lack of, it's an indifference, an attitude of indifference, because they do not tackle the main there is not the main problem for the United States. The main problems are right now against China. That's their problem. Their eye is shifting now to Latin America, especially to Venezuela, and trying to hold on to, of not letting go the hegemony of what they consider to be their hemisphere, and try to contain that this emerging world power with China, and give Europe the task of containing Russia, because Russia is not a threat to Europe. There's an alliance actually between collaboration between an economic collaboration between Russia and Europe. So what's happening with Middle East and Turkey, this would be a way of the United States retreating, because they have lost the impulse that they had, because regarding the Middle East, especially after the Syrian war, they did not achieve the results they were hoping for. They did not end victorious in that, and Russia was the one to establish the conditions so that the Islamic State be defeated, and Bashar al-Assad has not fallen, which was the main purpose in the geopolitical strategy of regime changing. So right now they're moving towards another terrain, trying to leave behind everything under control, but their priority right now in Trump's government, it is not seen as a priority at the moment. So thank you very much for your consideration, Hugo, for your hearing critical moves. I'm very glad to do so. So we say goodbye to Hugo, and he's an expert on the subject. And he said at the end of his interview that it's a reorientation of NATO's plan of expansion against Latin America, with an eye on Venezuela. And regarding the Secretary's declarations in the context of their anniversary, there's also the possibility that Brazil will soon step into the NATO. So this raises concerns, especially of how they're moving right now. The cards are being shuffled in a different way, and we will now deepen this specific question, and we have another guest waiting for us, and we will return after the break. NATO, 70 years of anniversary, and their geopolitical interests and expansion plans in Latin America and the Caribbean. We will focus right now on this subject, and we will go with our guest. The United States has been seen many defeats in military panorama. They're still stuck in Afghanistan, and it was and they lost against Bashar al-Assad and Russia. And in their military defeat, we talk about the alliance between Russia, China, and Latin America. So the United States trying to reorganize the board and apply the Monroe Doctrine. And for the United States, it's that Venezuela is socialist, and Russia and China may have interests in the region. And these are and right now key players are Colombia and Brazil, which are aligned to their interests. Colombia joined NATO as a global member, and Brazil within the context in that the secretary mentioned. Brazil may ask to be a member. The dispute is for the board of the World Control, while Washington is trying to impose their a unipolar regime. Practically all the military issues are raised because of resources, natural resources, and economical type issues. However, there's a military strategy which benefits the multinationals, which is looking Martin is the multinational, which is the one that sells the most weapons. Only 3 are not United States. In UK is the second one, and according to the Peace Institute from September 2001, the actions of these weapons institutions grew. And we will go now deep into with the lawyer, Venezuelan international lawyer, and a teacher for PhD institutions. So it's a pleasure to have you here. Our last guest said that he considers that NATO is not an alliance insofar that there's no equality of conditions within the members. But it's an instrument that serves the United States. Do you agree? So NATO is the weapon against humanity of the United States. And the European Union is there in that alliance, which is not a real alliance, within an independent, with a dependent need and subordination. And these conditions we're able to see now the cracks within the institution. So what about the plans of expansion towards Latin America and the Caribbean? Because NATO, why are they looking at us? It's not the first time. I'm going to tell you something. It's not the first time that NATO looks towards Latin America and comes to Latin America with their disasters. So historically, we're saying that yes, we're saying that NATO was born because the USSR was this big bloc, but now there's no more USSR. The Varsovia Pact doesn't hold anymore. There's not an enemy, so now we need to have a new enemy in 2001. In the United States, they had their own self-attempt against their own towers, and they activated NATO for any area because NATO did not leave their geographic area. But but during the Cold War, because we're here and Venezuela is suffering the conditions after the U.S. attacks. Throughout the Cold War, the practices from NATO were centered. They became experts. They practiced in Latin America because they did not have the permit of the free zone, and the global leader can do whatever they want worldwide, and they have no more limits. But during the Cold War, with the Condor operation, what NATO, NATO caused 1 million dead, and we should have analysis done on this because NATO acted in Latin America secretly through the military bases of the United States, through the embassies, through the intelligence communities of their members, and here we had persecutions, we had disappearances. So NATO was already here, but secretly. Right now, they're out in the open because the attempt in the world towers, they justify anything now. But we're talking about the Washington Treaty. We have to remember that it says that all all military base from a NATO member, wherever they are, the military bases will serve NATO's purposes to carry out their mission. Imagine that right now the United States has more than 800 military bases throughout the world, and in Latin America they have more than 80. Venezuela, they surrounded by 34 in the Caribbean. So that is a weapon that obeys the United States. Their military bases belongs to NATO and to the United States. So if if Colombia joins now, so now if Brazil wants to join NATO, it's not a true concern because they already are here through military bases. It doesn't really matter. NATO is already here. But that would make real the plan that to surround Venezuela. Yes, because right now what they want to do is to keep the powers against from Venezuela's position. The United States, however, is lost in the world. Does not have sure footing. It does not have conditions to win a war against Russia unless the United States has the help from China. And China is aligned with Russia. So when you see Donald Trump's despair, or we see that they have 2%, it's $1 billion. Now the members want more, want double. And why? Why do you think this is happening? Why does he? I think the resources are not over. He has not finished the resources. The United States is not in a good position, and it's an empire that it's an empire that was that is based on thievery, and right now they have stolen Venezuela without any scruple, without any. But right now the United States it feels it has lost footing within that alliance. Right now it's a warlike country, right? That's the only force that they can that serves them. And right now, even if the budget grew 4%, there's very strong cracks within the institution, and the world is moving towards something else right now, and NATO cannot hold it anymore. And right now, when we saw the video, the United States has failed has been defeated in all of these, the last ones. So when they moved without borders, and they went to Afghanistan, and then they went to Middle East, and then they went to Libya, and they have moved beyond their borders. What happens is with Latin America and the Caribbean, they were faced when they worked undercover, when they worked underhandedly. Right now, the United States is does not have sure footing because with the Union technological intel and between Russia and China, there's no place for the United States. And what is happening with the United States and members that go with the United States? So now other members, like Germany, for example, they want to create an army to defend European Union because they are subordinate. These members have said that they have to create an army to defend against Russia and China and even the United States. Do you think this plan will prosper in Germany? And a parallel army? I think that things are moving in such a way that the United States does not have a strength to stop it. At the moment, they're inventing the farce of communism and then terrorism after the after the towers. Right now, he's inventing a Machiavellian Russian, which must be stopped. But Russia, at the moment, what they have is a economical cooperation, and this is happening with a recession, a crisis that the United States is going through, which will explode any moment now. Their bubble, worse than 2008. And they do not see where they can go. So the United States is here attacking against Venezuela, and they cannot do anything because Venezuela is the example that what Russia and China and what is their military strength. In the United States, they cannot do it. They cannot. Syria, that's another example. There's the United States swearing to the world that, do you think they lost the war? Yes, they lost that war. Bashar Assad is in their presidential regime, and now they're working underhandedly through the terrorism, not bombarding because they don't have the weapons, because the United States what's left behind, and Europe sees it that way. Europe has to strengthen their economy. Germany is the strongest economy, and they're negotiating gasoduct with Russia. They already nobody's going to stop that gasoduct. Turkey, which was the domain of the United States, right now is a Russian alliance, and it goes against the U.S. politics. And right now, France is leading that so there's internal differences, and within the already weakened institutions, there are already differences, but enough to isolate the United States and their interests and Trump's interests, which are not are not the interest from the United States. So I think it's not so. These events are not so quick, not so fast. We have seen this transformation, which has not stopped. A transformation. They have these emerging countries have been cropping up, and afterwards we see now the defeats of through all these wars for the United States, and we see the ridiculous declarations, which are very pitiful. We see Trump's declarations. We see people that are at they're losing, they're being defeated, and their alliance with the European Union. The European Union doesn't want that subordination anymore, and they're moving things inside. So NATO is not well outside, and they have an internal crisis. This show us a change in the world order. There's a correlation of different forces, a military correlation, which not like NATO and the United States, because NATO is in the United States. The other ones are just piggybacking, and they leave breadcrumbs for all the countries so they leave breadcrumbs for the other members. So that's why they accept subordinations. Right now, the attacks against Venezuela, they left because they're like thieves. Because we're not going to turn over gold. So that is a world which is not well economically. So they want to go look against Russia and China. Otherwise, it's suffocated, and the European Union will be suffocated. Now, with that European Union economically restrained, why will they want to remain subordinate every time that the United States achieves a war, which is what they want to do right now, to get over their crisis? There's a crisis in the world order, established order, that was constituted in the world after Second World War. What we see right now is something that is not permanent. We're moving towards something more permanent, which we cannot already see, and it's a panorama that is different of after World War. So we're talking about a world which is not well economically, which must have conjoint projects with Russia and China, for example, China, with Germany, France, several other countries in Europe. Will this raise pressures within U.S. interests? Yes, this means a defeat for the United States, because they use as filler that European Union to justify and to have them set up as a world power. So they are such thieves that they consider that the rest is logical. Who's the leader in NATO? When does NATO move? When Germany requires it? No, when the United States requires it, because these countries are paying for the United States to hold their empire, and they're tired of this. They're seen as the United States as an enemy. They have already declare them a partner they have to be careful of in France. And we see this throughout European countries. And they are there because they're piggybacking. In the press conference that we saw 48 hours ago in White House with the secretary of NATO secretary, his tone was different from that we used to have in Brussels, in Belgium, in July last year, where they had the summit that they did not reach any agreement, and we already saw the differences between members, and he's saying that he's saying that the members need to give more money, etc. And why? Because the countries, the main members, European countries, we have realized they're subordinates. They do not have anything, and that the enemy is made up by the United States, and what they get is breadcrumbs, and they're not well economically. So how is Europe surviving without relating, for example, just one, gas with Russia? Where do they get it? So the game is stuck for the United States. They have internal problems. What we used to say and study, because it repeated continually, saying that the United States is the military world power, biggest world power, is not true anymore, and it's already evident. It's already made evident. They have not won any war, and I will say now that NATO is a murdering machine for the United States. Are you optimistic regarding multi players? Yes, because we're here in Venezuela, and Venezuela has had to be the center of the world to raise the flag of multilateralism, and with countries that are not with imperialistic tendencies, that have they fight for pluripolarism, and Hugo Chavez was the father of pluripolarism, and we're seeing right now that it's growing in strength. The attack that from the United States, and what we are seeing right now, all these attacks against this struggle against this empire, we see the flags raising up. And here we see in this country, the United States has become naked with their own behavior, and all the tendencies and strategies they have used in the world. Europe right now does not respect the United States because we should be afraid of the U.S. So it's not a preservation for peace and security. No, it's an organization for war. It's an organization that has the biggest budget in the world for weapons, the biggest quantity of weapons, of the highest, not necessarily the best technological weapons, but they have most nuclear weapons concentrated in one. So that's their characteristics. Their wars have always been illegal. Their wars are sadistic and diabolical. NATO was the one that in a very small territory like Yugoslavia, in that territory they bombarded 2,300 missiles and bombs in just 70 days. They're sick, but that's the fight, the struggle of hegemony of in the world power. We have to have an enemy. They developed this setup based on this attempt in 2011, and then they bombarded Afghanistan, and they bombarded Iraq, and they deployed what we have today. But they are amoral. They are not strong because this new world is rising, this emerging world, polaristic world, the world that believes in international law and sovereignty. So this is my conclusion. Thank you for being here. So we will go to our conclusions now. With the biggest budget, military budget in the world, and NATO, that's not an independent institution, but an instrument, a clear instrument for domain for the United States. Historically, they have surpassed their geographical margin, and which was their reason for being. It's not an alliance itself, and their reason for being is the U.S. hegemony and have a world impact. And also, it's an instrument to guarantee unilateralism. A world which is not well economically and depends on Russia and China needs which is right now contained in the United States and what we're saying. So while NATO has acted without impunity in the planet, there's now a new world that is emerging and has to do with multilateralism. So we're talking about a divide, a conflict between two ideologies that are antagonical. And another idea, which I have to express, the United States is trying to reshuffle the cards and turning their eye against Latin America and specifically Venezuela, and using the Monroe Doctrine and asking for cheap oil, Venezuelan oil. And this is what we saw with our guest, Hugo. We reach our end of our program, and thank you for being with us today.